Welcome. Tonight I will tell you a story about life aboard a train that never stops. Make yourself comfortable, save this video, and let it carry you gently into a peaceful sleep. Now, let us begin our journey. The train has no beginning and no end, at least none that you can see. It is not a vehicle in motion. It is the world itself, moving forever on rails that stretch into silence. From the moment you step inside, the sound takes you captive. The metallic heartbeat of wheels on steel, clack after clack, like a giant clock with no hands, measuring a time that never arrives. To the people born here, this rhythm is a lullaby, a comfort. To you, it feels like interrogation, a question that repeats itself with every turn of the wheels. Where are you going? And will you ever arrive? The air is thick, almost edible. It smells of boiled grains, oil, old metal, and human breath pressed together by too many bodies in too little space. Dust from coal and rust sticks to your tongue. The corridor is narrow, swaying with the movement of the carriage, lined with hammocks and bunks stacked like drawers in a chest. Some are patched with scraps of canvas. Others sag under the weight of many years and many sleepers. The lamps overhead burn with a dull yellow, their light shivering as if it too is tired of the journey. Morning is not heralded by the sun, for few remember what dawn looks like beyond glass that cannot be opened. Instead, the train itself wakes its people. The wheels shift in pitch, the floor vibrates in a slightly new rhythm, and everyone knows it is time. Children climb from their bunks, hair sticking to their foreheads with the sweat of night. Women shake out blankets stiff with cold air that seeps through the seams. Men stretch their arms carefully so as not to hit the low ceiling. Here, even the simplest movements must be economical, respectful of the train's geometry. Tin cups clatter against enamel basins. A line forms by the water tank, a dented cylinder bolted to the wall. A boy pumps the handle with both hands until a trickle comes, barely enough to rinse a face. A woman scoops a ladleful into her palm, splashes her child's cheeks, then wrings the cloth she used yesterday and hangs it on a nail. Hygiene here is not about comfort, but survival. To wipe away the soot before it hardens in the skin, to keep sickness from spreading in a place where escape is impossible. At the far end, a man sharpens a knife against a strip of steel welded into the wall. Sparks leap and vanish in the damp air. The sound blends with the train's voice until it seems like another instrument in the orchestra of movement. Across from him, a girl ties twine around her shoes to hold the soles together. Her younger brother watches closely. He will need to learn this trick soon, for shoes wear faster than stories here. The dining wagon, if such a name can be given to a swaying room of stoves bolted to the floor, is already alive with heat. Smoke crawls up to the ceiling, trapped against the lamps. Cooks bend over battered pots, stirring porridge that smells faintly of maize and ash. Thin slices of bread are laid out on chipped plates, each piece nearly transparent. There is no feast here, only fairness. Heads bow briefly as bowls are passed hand to hand, not in prayer, but in silent accounting. Is every portion equal? Did anyone receive more than they should? Conversation fights against the roar of steel. Voices must lean close, lips nearly brushing ears just to be understood. Laughter exists, but in short bursts, snatched between turns, broken off by jolts in the track. Words fall quickly, swallowed by the rhythm of the wheels. Children play by tracing shapes into the fogged windows with their fingers, watching the circles vanish in seconds under the weight of collective breath. For them, the outside world is no more than a blur of colors, glimpsed through glass that hasn't been cleaned for decades. At the end of the wagon, a door rattles in its frame, leading to another carriage. It sways violently, a threshold between worlds. Each wagon has its own purpose. Some are for food, some for work, some for rest. To the children, these carriages are kingdoms, each ruled by its own laws. To you, they are cages in a chain, and the thought of walking through them all makes the air in your chest feel thin. The train surges forward with a sudden lurch as though it has sensed your hesitation. Outside, landscapes flicker past in perpetual exile. Forests stripped of their green, endless fields of ash and snow. Cities reduced to ruins that blur like broken teeth. The passengers do not look. For them, outside is myth, too far and too dangerous to believe in. Inside is all that matters. Inside is the only world that breathes. An old man sits near the window, holding a rosary made not of beads, but of metal nuts strung on wire. His lips move silently, not in prayer, but in counting. A child watches him with wide eyes, then imitates the gesture with buttons sewn into his sleeve. Faith here is not about gods. Faith is about rhythm, about surviving one more mile, about never letting go of the sound that proves you are still moving. Someone tells you, quietly, as if the train itself might be listening, that no one alive remembers the first departure. The elders say their grandparents were already born inside these carriages, already rocked to sleep by the endless hum of steel. This is not a journey. It is inheritance. People are born here, live here, die here, and their bodies are laid to rest in a small carriage at the rear, which the train eventually swallows whole. No one asks how. No one wants to know. The morning completes its cycle not with sunrise, but with certainty. Everyone has eaten. Everyone has washed. The children are dressed. The men sharpen their tools. The women fold blankets. The train itself hums in satisfaction, as if pleased to have awoken its cargo to another day of perpetual travel. And you understand the first truth. You would not last a day here. Not because the people are cruel, they are not. Not because the work is unbearable, it is bearable, but only through habit. You would not last because you cannot silence the question in your mind, where is this train going? Why has it never stopped? The passengers do not ask. They only live. And that is why they endure, while you already feel the walls leaning in, the sound drilling through your bones. They teach you the first rule of the doors before they let you cross. Never grab the handles when the coupling screams. Metal lies, says the boy with the twine boots, now your guide by right of having watched you survive an hour. Await for the third quiet. He taps the rubber gasket 3 times, listening not with his ear but with his palm. On the third hush, the carriage slackens its breath, and only then does he pull. The door opens on a seam of cold air and the sound grows larger, as if you had stepped from a room into the throat that carries every room along. The gangway is a short bridge, but it behaves like a sea. The floor plates flex. The accordion walls sigh around you. Below, the coupler moves in its iron yoke like a jaw arguing with itself. Through the slit in the rubber bellows, you glimpse a smear of outside, white, then grey, then colors that do not organize into landscape before the next shiver takes them away. The boy, Rin, he tells you, goes first with the certainty of someone who learned balance before letters. Hold here, he says, and shows you the rail polished by a million hands. You place your palm where every other palm has learned to live and pass into another country. Every wagon has a purpose and a temperament. You learn to read them by smell before you learn their names. The first is the workshop, hot with iron breath and old arguments. The door opens to a room of hung tools, each shadow the shape of something repaired long enough to become tradition. Valves puff quietly along the ceiling. A low belt runs the length of the wall, humming the note that means the generator has manners today. A woman with a leather apron and a triangle of soot on her cheek looks up from a vise. Hands, she asks, meaning show me your palms. She reads blisters like a fortune teller reads lines. New, she says, satisfied, so you carry nothing that will catch. She points her chin to a bench. If you sit still. If you touch only with your eyes. Racks hold salvage treasure. Belts cut from tires and stitched with wire. Screws sorted by thread in jars whose labels are old brands of jam. A drawer of springs that sing when you slide it open. Two teenagers bend over a fan that has forgotten how to be a circle. They coax it with pliers and patience. On the wall, chalk letters under the heading, The List of Squeaks. Third axle, car 12, left, door catch, school car, belt chatter when grade steepens, unknown tapping, likely stow rattling. Ask Morrow. Each solved squeak is crossed out in a different hand. The unsolved ones carry small notes in the margin. Heard it once during long curve. Think it lives behind panel, as if the noises were shy animals to be tracked rather than enemies to be killed. Rin touches the board with a pride that doesn't need him to speak. We keep them, he says of the sounds, so they don't keep us. He is learning to be a maintenance runner, holes in his shoes and all, and the runners are half legend on the train. The ones who move between cars with tools in their pockets and the entire train's map in the soles of their feet. You move on. The market is less a wagon than a corridor that believes in economy. Hooks, nets, narrow counters that fold up when the aisle must become a street again. Trade is not money here. It's time and parts measured in the units the train respects. A woman offers a length of good twine in exchange for 10 minutes on someone's sewing needle. A boy with a palmful of screws asks for 2 slices of yesterday's crust to feed the sparrows that have adopted the roof vents. A man with a tin of axle grease passes it toward a line of hands the way a sacred text might be passed down a pew. Each person takes a thumb's worth and moves it on. There is a currency, minting itself in the workshop. Thin washer coins punched from scrap, each with a notch that indicates the hour of work it will be exchanged for. Someone has strung 3 across a leather thong. a necklace that says I can ask for help without begging. On a crate sits a bowl of brightly colored buttons. Rin explains that buttons are for children, not because they are worthless, but because they buy kindness that adults forget to trade. Songs, stories, extra turns at the viewport in the school. The school car smells of chalk, paper softened by elbows and old varnish. The floor gives slightly, trained to the car's sway so no one learns to fear movement. A map takes up one wall, not of cities or countries long gone, but of the train itself, where the bakery oven lives, where the coil still drips, where the doors that stick on cold mornings wait to embarrass the unwary. A teacher with a calm voice, called reader by everyone as if her name were her job, taps a rhythm on the blackboard with the chalk, while the children speak the scales of the rails aloud. Short, short, long, 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 short. They are learning grades by ear, weather by pitch, coupler tempers by shudder. Geography for them is not distance, but distribution of necessary things. You sit on a bench built for smaller hips than yours. On the ledge is a glass case with 3 artifacts: a brass key with no lock to fit, a metal tag stamped with a number no one uses anymore, and a bolt bent into the shape of a question mark. Relics, reader says, noticing your look. Oh, we keep them for the story they won't tell. The train began before any of us. We are not a beginning. We are the continuation. When she turns to write, the chalk listens to the train and keeps time. The clinic, 2 cars down, tastes faintly of iodine and mint oil. Shelves hold jars of remedies with names that are both science and superstition. Iodine, willow bark, salt, rest, soup, 3 songs, darkness. A nurse, Mero, who wears their hair braided with thread like a shift tally, wraps a wrist, checks a tongue, notes a cough. On the wall, a simple poster shows the 7 signs that a person needs the more serious help, kept near the heart car. Breath that counts too fast, lips too pale, fever that refuses, dizzy when still, cough that becomes metal, sleep that does not wake you, wool in the head that will not comb. The clinic is generous but stern. It hands out medicine and boundaries in equal measure. Rest, Mero tells a man who wants to return to the workshop. The train keeps going when you sit. It's our one mercy. Between cars, a narrow vestibule has become the house of small repairs. Rin shows you how to enter. 3 knocks, a pause, a 4th with the knuckle of the ring finger so the sound carries a different shape and tells whoever is inside that you are not a child playing a door. Inside, in half light and the gentle drumming of rain against the skin, 2 elders mend laundry by feel. Needles breathe through cloth with a sound like a tiny saw. A box near the door holds socks with holes and is labeled in a formal hand. Pick one, fix one, replace one where you found it. It's not a rule exactly. It's an agreement. At the very center of the train is the board, a single carriage devoted to a wall-sized diagram, string, pegs, chalk, mapping duty and rumor in equal quantities. Names hang on pegs under shift: runner, Rin and Savvy, stove, Leogen, bearing listener, Harka, water, Anna, reader, Seema. Under rumor, someone has written in the careful script reader teaches: 3 breaths of slow at dawn yesterday, witnessed by Stove Jen. Below it, in different hands, felt it in the coupler, not imagination. Then a red ribbon pinned near the bottom where warnings go, black mouth likely tonight. Lids fastened, lamps dimmed, songs kept for inside the head. You follow Rin's eyes to the ribbon and he shrugs as if to say, "It is what the rails give us." He says, "We pass the black mouth most months. Sometimes the sparks fall from the ceiling. We catch them with pans." He points to a small chalked mark beside your name. Yes, your name. Someone has written it there, tentatively, as if testing whether the train accepts it. A square and a circle around it, the symbols for watcher and carry light. "You can stand by the viewport and tell us if you see the ladder sign," Rin says. "If there's fog in the black mouth, the signal moves." The ladder means a low beam ahead. "We don't stop, but we duck." He says it like a joke and not a joke. Past the board, the coil stills thrum, glass bellies condensing breath into water with the slow patience of things that cannot be rushed. Drips fall into jars with the sound of seconds. A woman named Anna keeps count on her fingers, lips mouthing the sums. How much for drinking, how much for soup, how much for yesterday's laundry. Salt from the collection pans is scraped into a dish and saved like money. "We lose more to air than to mouths," she says without reproach, as if speaking of a beloved who can't help themselves. She tucks a jar into your hands. "Carry," she says to Rin. "Or will be math instead of people. There is a place for the dead, though no one shows it yet." Instead, you are led to the porch, an unofficial name for the small window at the end of a service car where the bravest children are allowed to put their faces for exactly 5 breaths to feel the morning's teeth. A bracket holds a leather strap. A sign above it says simply, "Ask someone to hold you." Rin loops the strap across your chest as a matter of ritual and respect. Outside is not a view but an assault. Cold that smells of iron and stone, a roar like the world's throat torn open. You last 2 breaths, 3 by pride, and step back laughing at your own tears. A girl waiting her turn, missing a front tooth, hair tied with twine, looks at you with a seriousness that lifts your foolishness. "It hurts the first time," she says. "Then you learn to say hello to it and it doesn't mind you." She must be 7. In the school again, Rita unrolls a canvas and shows the children the engine. No picture of it exists, so the drawing is part skeleton, part legend. The heart car with its heavy flywheels, the long lungs of boilers or batteries depending on which story your teller believes. The dynamo's copper coils like nested snakes, the brakes drawn as hands pushing forever against forever. On the edge of the canvas is written the line we keep, we do not stop. We pass things. Reader taps that line and the children say it with the seriousness of people reciting their own address. "It means we catch supplies without asking the world to wait," Rin whispers to you. "You'll see when we reach the nets." You pass through laundry, steam, clotheslines, a barrel repaired with brass rivets and hope. Through storage, crates stenciled with names of places that are no longer places, now just good wood for shelves. Through the sound room, where Harka the bearing listener sits with a hand against the floor and one against a pipe, eyes closed, face turned toward the noise. She opens one eye when you come in and draws a finger across her lip, meaning silence is the tool here, not words. She taps the pipe 3 times, listens to what the tap tells the bolts 2 cars away, then nods, as if a conversation had gone her way. It is all so practiced that you almost miss the story unfolding in the corners. The board's rumor about 3 breaths of slow at dawn, the red ribbon for the black mouth, the list of squeaks carrying a new line. Unknown tapping grew louder today, likely behind panel near school. You notice chalk under Rin's fingernails and realize he has been adding notes while you swallow the sights. Lunch is not a scene you saw in the morning, not repetition but variation. Thick soup in metal mugs that keep the heat like secrets, pickled something that wakes the mouth, a slice of apple that tastes like a holiday only spoken of and never observed. Everything is eaten standing because the train chooses this mile to remind everyone that chairs are a privilege. A boy counts rails under his breath. A woman refolds the same towel twice beneath a pot, so the pot will sit level on a floor that refuses to be any one thing for long. You find the net wagon mid-train, roof hatch open to the grey light that pretends not to be weather. 2 nets sit coiled like sleeping animals, ropes whiter than anything else on the train. A young man with a bite-shaped scar on his arm teaches 3 kids the throw. Not up and out, but low and wide, catching the sacks hung on long poles at the trackside outposts that, according to story, are tended by people who also never stop, who live in towers counting trains like beads. "We don't stop," he says the line again, like a prayer or a confession. We pass things. He shows them the knot that frees itself in a hurry if the net snags. He shows them where to stand if the wind changes its mind without warning. He teaches them to look down and forward at the same time, a skill you didn't know could be taught. In a narrow alcove between cars, you see chalk marks at shoulder height, slashes grouped in 5s. Rin touches one that looks new. "Long grade," he says. We marked them so we can tell if the song of the train is honest. Yesterday, the song dragged here. Harka said it wasn't the grade. She thinks it was something else. He leaves the sentence open, a window without glass. "Anyway," he adds in the tone of someone who puts his worry in a jar for later, "we'll oil the couplers from the inside of the song." That helps. At the far end of the day's tour stands a door with a sign you do not expect, a neat piece of tin scratched with the word heart. No one invites you through. Rin salutes the metal without irony. "That's for later," he says, meaning not for you, not yet, not until sweat and blisters and the list of squeaks say your hands belong. He points you instead to the viewport 2 cars back, where tonight you will stand with others under the dimmed lamps while the black mouth takes the sky away, watching for the ladder sign, the low beam that lives in fog and ruin, the hint of a world you can only cross. When you turn to speak, Reader is there, as if she had stepped out from between sentences. "You see the city now?" she asks. Her voice is low and even, pitched to slip under the wheel song and inside the ear's patience. "We do not have streets, but we have ways." We do not have addresses, but we have duties. The train is not a nation, she says, and you understand she is addressing your questions before you find the words. But it is not a prison either. It is a grammar. We live by agreement and friction. She lifts one shoulder toward the rumor board, the red ribbon, the chalk mark by your name. Sometimes, rarely, the train slows. We do not plan for it, she says. Are we prepared to deserve it? Rin grins, the gap-toothed bravado of someone who believes he can hold the coupler's temper in his palm. Tonight, he announces too loudly for a car that listens, you get to keep watch. Reader nods once, which means this is decided. We need eyes that still see outside as something other than a story, she says. Just there, by the viewport. The glass is thick, the strap is strong. If you see the ladder, say down. If you don't, say nothing. The train gives a small, particular jolt, the kind Harka will later identify on the list as sleeper gap, benign. Lunch ends because the rails ask it to, not the clock. People fold their bowls into their pockets, a magic trick called we cannot afford edges. The workshop receives the smell of soup as a blessing it doesn't know it needed. The school drums a new rhythm. The board absorbs 3 more names under shift and 2 under rumor. Above the distant door of the heart car, a man with a necklace of washer coins passes carrying a coil of rope. He glances toward the board's red ribbon without breaking stride. You have not seen a horizon all day and do not miss it as much as you thought you would. Instead, you catalogue this moving city the way a traveler catalogues a foreign capital, by its tastes and its rules. Here are the lamps that answer to dimming. Here are the nets that catch gifts without asking the giver to slow. Here is the room where quiet fixes more than tools can. Here is the chalk where news and fear share space and do not cancel each other. By the time the lights begin their slow evening bow, you know 2 things. This is a place, not a passage, and the story that rode in on the rumor, 3 breaths of slow at dawn, is not done with you. Somewhere under you, the unknown tap on the list of squeaks is choosing its words. Somewhere ahead, the black mouth is opening. Rin puts the coil jar in your hands like a ceremonial weight. For the view, he says. For the ladder. His palms are black with good work. Yours are learning. The train does not notice your small courage. It sings its endless song and expects you to harmonize. Tonight you will go to the viewport with the others, strap on the leather, and learn the grammar of down. And beyond the glass, in a world that forgot to stop, something will hold up a sign in the fog, and you will decide if it speaks to you. They put your name on the board with real chalk this time. No tentative square and circle, but a clear line under shift. Watcher, viewport, car 11, carry light, with Rin. Reader taps the entry with the back of the chalk. Not quite a blessing. Day work first, she says. Night will demand a steadier set of hands if the day gives them something honest to do. Rin is waiting with a runner's bundle already slung. Belt of pockets stitched from tarp, grease jar tied with wire, a stub of chalk, a coil of safety line, a 3-wrench set polished by use into something like jewelry. He pushes a cap at you, brim low, to keep grit out of eyes, and checks your laces with the brisk authority of someone half your age and twice your competence. The list grew a line, he says, thumbing toward the chalkboard in the workshop as you pass. Unknown tapping, louder by school. Likely behind panel. He grins, a small mean glee reserved for puzzles he thinks he can beat. We'll go listen. The workshop is busier than morning. Valves breathe a little faster. The generator's belt sings its honest note. Harka, the bearing listener, sits cross-legged on a mat with one hand on the floor and one against a copper pipe. Eyes closed, head tilted like a bird decoding wind. She opens one eye when Rin and Yu pause in the door. Grade is fair, she says in lieu of hello. Song is true 3 cars forward, cloudy by school. Don't frighten it with tools before you hear it. You carry light. It is not a metaphor. It's a jar, half full of the train's own brightness stolen from a strip lamp, glass smoky from years of heat, hung from a leather thong. People glance at it and nod because work has begun, the kind that doesn't move the train and without which it would not move at all. They start you easy, which on this train means dangerous in a slower way. Rin takes the lead into the gangway, hand to the polished rail, chin lifted and turned as if listening with his bones. He waits for the third quiet, the pause between shoves when couplers finish arguing about whose turn it is to strain, and pulls the door. You follow onto the maintenance ledge, a catwalk ribboning along the wagon's inside skin, one hand high on a line, one foot finding the places the train has taught feet to find. Close up, the world is a vocabulary of fasteners and fatigue. Bolts bloom with a patina you can smell. Patches over patches tell the archaeology of breaks and fixes. Each has a hand signature in soot. Rin raps a panel with his knuckles. The metal answers in 2 voices, both wrong. You hear that? He raps again just inside the school car. Tick, 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 not the beat of wheels. A second voice that doesn't know the song well yet. He raps harder. Tick, 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 louder. There, he says, satisfied. Back of the viewport wall. Permission, he calls through the school's sliding door before he drops to his knees and prizes at 4 quick turn catches. Reader is mid-lesson, chalk keeping time, children chanting the rail's scales under their breath. She lifts a hand and the chant becomes hum. Go ahead, she says. Quietly. The panel comes off like a secret that has been waiting to be told. Inside is an organ box of the train's anatomy. Cable looms wrapped like sleeping snakes, conduit, the hard leather strap that keeps a watcher from learning to fly, an iron ladder folded flat into the wall for the rare time someone must climb to replace a lamp above the viewport. One rung is loose. Not loose. The weld has gone brittle at one end, the free half tapping the panel with each sway. Tick, tick, tick. Rin looks indecently pleased. Not a ghost, he says. Laziness. He flicks the rung with a fingernail. It answers like a tooth. The weld breaks clean at his touch, as if deciding for itself. He doesn't flinch. He gloved you at the workshop door with thick cloth mitts that smell of oil. He only says, we'll pin it, double the strap, mark it for a proper fix when the swap team is at the heart. Together, you learn a 3-handed dance. Rin holds the rung dead to stop its speech, You thread soft wire through the ladder's side rails and twist until metal agrees to remember stillness. A girl with solemn eyes, Rita called her Lael, slides the leather strap through the buckle twice and knots a second safety around the window post. So if the ladder speaks again tonight, she says, the strap will not believe it. Her small mouth does not smile. Her hands are exact. Inside the cavity, just behind the ladder, something else glints. A thin metal tag, number-stamped, bolted wrong way out so the digits face the corridor. You tilt the jar of light and read 11V/port/4R. Reader bends to look. Viewport, car 11, right side 4th rivet. She translates for those who don't speak machine. Her knuckle touches the rivet head. It has drifted. Rin. He is already chalking a ring around the rivet, then another above it on the painted steel. Do not trust lower rung. In careful block letters he must have practiced. He hands you the chalk. Are you right the watcher part, he says. Your letters are clumsier than his, less used to moving while the world moves, but they hold. Strap check twice. Harka appears without sound. She could teach the train its own stealth. She puts a finger to the panel edge and listens. The second voice is gone. Good, she says. Don't close it yet. She taps the ladder with a knuckle soft as a mouse. It remains decent. Good, she repeats, but her gaze has drifted to the bolt head with the number. A port rivet, she murmurs. Reader? Reader is already at the blackboard between windows, chalk bending under her purposeful hand. Unknown tapping. She crosses out the line. Under it she writes, Viewport ladder, car 11, lower rung wired, strap doubled, rivet 4, R drift. She underlines rivet. We'll ask the heart car, she says, as if asking a mountain to explain rain. Heart won't answer you, says a voice from the door. Morrow, apron smudged, hair tied back with copper wire. He smells of the generator's breath. But if you want to speak to it, you ask me. He glances at the children, quickly softening his tone. You ask the people who listen to the people who listen. He taps the metal tag. That's an old mark. Port rivet 4, right hasn't drifted in years. He frowns, not at the broken thing, but at what it implies. Oh, we've had 3 breaths of slow last dawn and a rivet drift today. The heart's telling us something we don't want to translate. The black mouth tonight, Rita says. Maro's eyes flick to the red ribbon on the board. Good, he says. Then we'll tighten while the sky's dark and the air speaks less. You close the panel under Harka's nod and carry on. Rin drags you 2 cars down to the brake house, a compartment not large but heavy with intention. Steel shoes, hooped drums, a rack of levers that will never be pulled by your hand. 2 older men sit on the bench under the gauges, wrists thick, eyes steady, murmuring the names of hills you cannot see. The long grade starts 100 chalk slashes from now, one says. You can smell it in the belt, the other smiles without humor. I can taste it in my teeth. Rin shows you the oil cups along the coupler socket, the brass mushrooms you unscrew with half turns, feed a thumb of grease, screw back with a sense for resistance rather than an exact number. He shows you where a pin needs to face, slot vertical so water runs off and doesn't sit. He makes you practice with the jar of light clamped under your elbow, one hand feeding, the other steadying the world while it refuses to be steady. Your fingers find their own tempo, press and twist, until the motion moves into your wrists and you can imagine doing it blind if smoke ever asks you to. You learn filters next. A square of thick cloth that catches the black snow the train makes simply by existing. A row of them hang along a frame like tired flags. Anna from water arrives, arms full of clean cloth, a coil of line across one shoulder. She and Rin work as if they share a pulse. You unhook, she hooks, he knots. You carry the dirty load away so it can be beaten, but not too hard. Fiber is precious, and washed, but not too much. Water is more precious still. You do not need to be told why this matters. You can taste the difference in 3 breaths and would have knelt to the cloth if your knees weren't already busy. Harka calls from the far end without raising her voice the way a bell never has to shout to be itself. Grade. She doesn't say, "Here it comes," or "hold." She says the one word that makes everyone's hands slower, more exact, kinder to the levers and bolts. The floor's vibration goes a tone lower. The window glass frowns. The couplers ask the world to give back force it stole as if they were owed it. The train lengthens into the hill like a body that has learned to breathe while pulling. Count, Rin says to you, and he means rails. He taps his fingers against the panel at shin height, and you try to fall into the counting song Reader drilled into children. Short, short, long, short, long. The numbers start to fail you at 30, return at 40, then blur. The counting helps. It is not mathematics. It is a place to put your fear. In the long curve that follows the first shoulder of the hill, trouble tries to make a home. A belt along the generator wall begins to chatter, a dry cricket noises that Harka wrote on the list last week. Maro is already there, 2 fingers on the belt, other hand on a small can of oil. No grabbing, he says, not to you but to his own muscle memory. We ask and it lets us. He touches the belt's running flank with a rag dipped just so. The sound changes from teeth to hum. The hum changes to a tone that tells him he has not overfed it. I will redress at heart, he says. Not here. Not in the hill Rin slips, not far, not dangerously at first. It's a stutter of soul on oil, exactly the kind Harka had mentioned as harmless in the list, until his ankle finds the ledge that calls itself a step and then forgets to be one. You move without thinking, because he trains you without speeches, because you have been counting rails and they taught you to trust the beat. Your hand finds the back of his belt, the place sewn thicker for exactly this. He is heavier than his bones know, you are stronger than your head believes. He catches the rail with his other hand and laughs once, short, a file on iron. Rule? He says, testing if panic erased lessons. Never grab the belt, you answer at once, a child's recitation dressed in grease. He grins wide enough to show you the missing tooth. Good. And thank you for ignoring that rule to hold the right belt. You cross 2 more cars, each with its own breath. In the stove car, you learn the ritual of heat. Green flames are a sin, blue is virtue, yellow is fatigue. Jen taps the gauge, not to scold it, but to remind it of honesty. She ties a strip of cloth near a vent as a tell. If the cloth lies still, air is sulking. If it flutters, the stove is stealing more than its share. She trims it with a screwdriver like a surgeon untangling a vein. By the time you turn back toward the board to report the ladder, the day has exhaled the heat of its hardest hour. The chalk under rumor is busy. Grade took longer. Ask H. Net team saw ash fray at mile X. Ask Anna refilters. Reader draws a new line in red chalk under warning, below the ribbon. Asterisk black mouth confirmed after 3rd bell. Lamps low. Lids tight. Songs inside heads. She writes your name under watch with 3 others and the small sign Reader uses for remember, this is not bravery. It is attention. Before you go, she tells you, tell the board what you fixed. You lift the chalk. Your letters don't improve, but your hand is steadier. Unknown tapping fixed. Ladder rung wired. Strap doubled. Rivet 4, awe drift. You stop at drift because you do not know what the right next word is. Worry? Note? Reader, watching, writes beside your line in her own neat hand, marrow to speak with heart. She underlines speak as if to insist the heart will accept conversation if given in the right tone. Food reappears in the world. Thick soup, a piece of pickled something that argues pleasantly with your tongue, a sliver of hard cheese older than 3 children in the school. People eat standing again because the rails say chairs tonight are a misstep waiting in the floor. The talk is low, chopped small by the rhythm. Laughter comes in coins and someone spends one just so the day ends square. You carry the light back to workshop to hang it on its hook and find Harka marking the list. She crosses out unknown tapping with 1 careful stroke. Above it, though, she writes a new line in a smaller hand. 3 breaths of slow. Not just grade. Felt it in the pipe. Ask Port Rivet. She doesn't look at you as she writes, which is kindness. The train makes speech, she says to her pipe. Our job is to remember the words. Dusk insists from the corners inward. The market folds its counters into the wall so the aisle can become a street. The clinic closes its drawer of needles with a promise of mourning. The school covers the relic case with a cloth, not to protect the relics but to teach the night good manners. Hatches are dogged, nets are coiled. Children who have earned 2 breaths at the porch collect their tokens and return with hair shot through with cold. Rita meets the watchers by the viewport in car 11, Lael Rin, because he will be allowed everything if mischief can be halted by competence. An older woman with the square shoulders of someone who used to lift sacks from a moving pole, and you. She checks straps twice because chalk said twice and chalk is law here. The lamp goes to ember. Your jar of light is hooded. The world leans forward a degree. Someone pins a 2nd red ribbon on the board. Not because a new warning has arrived, but because the first needs company. Remember, Rita says in a voice pitched under the wheels, If you see the ladder, down. She doesn't say, if we miss it, doesn't say, head. She says, down, and you feel your neck already learning the motion. The black mouth appears before it arrives, like thunderstorms do, a taste in the air of stone rubbed on stone, a hush beneath the train's song that is not silence, but a held breath. The world's, not yours. People dim lamps. The board's chalk becomes just lines, not words. The stove trims flame to its smallest honest blue. You put your face near the glass, breath held to spare it mist, the leather strap a firm promise across your chest. Then the true dark, so sudden the eye thinks it closed by mistake. The sound changes too, turns hollow, as if the rails have moved from ground to a drum. Sparks bloom and fall from the ceiling in far places, pans ready below to catch them. In the first moments inside the mouth, your sense of up and forward decouple. The train keeps its own compass, you borrow it. Across the hum, beneath the wheel hymn and the little pan reins, you hear it. Not the old tick, tick, tick of a lazy rung, but a new rhythm deeper in the bones. 3 slow easings of strain, 1 then a breath, 2 then a breath, 3, and the pull resumes. Harka is somewhere on the floor above your head, palm on a pipe, confirming with her body what your ear knows. Maro leans into the coupler cavity a car back with his own diagnosis. Reader's hand rests just above your shoulder. She will not touch while you watch, but her heat is a lighthouse. Rin's fingers drum the rail's scale on the window frame without thinking. The older woman breathes through her nose and says nothing. Lael's eyes are wide and accurate. Outside the glass, the black mouth eats distance. Ladder, Rin whispers once, hope, not report. Not yet, says the older woman. Then, there, a pale shape, 2 verticals linked by rungs, painted on a slab at the tunnel edge so people who never stop will know to duck. It drifts out of the dark like a memory decided to help. Down, you say, voice steady because you practice the word with your bones. 4 backs bend in the viewport room. Across 3 carriages the bow wave of the word travels. Down, down, down. The beam misses heads by a hat's pride. On some other night with some other strap, it might not have. When you rise, you expect relief. Instead, in the new dark that follows the beam, the train speaks again in its 3 breaths of slow. Not grade, your new ear knows that now. Not caution, reader would have told you. Something else. A communication or a complaint or a kindness. 3 slow easings everyone feels in molars and the tight muscle behind the jaw. What's it saying? You hear yourself ask, almost to the glass. Harka answers from her pipe 2 cars away as if she stood beside you. It says, don't be louder than you must, she says. And hold what can be held. And listen, I am telling you something real. The black mouth opens back into world, not mourning, but the idea of it. Lamps rise 3 notches. The pan crews examine their catches and find only ash and courage. Reader squeezes your shoulder once, brief as the flash of sparks, and the strap comes off your chest with a sound like a borrowed heart being returned. Behind you, on the list of squeaks, the line you crossed out this afternoon is already replaced with 3 new questions. Under them, in Reader's measured hand, viewport safe. Rivet Drift noted, 3 slow again, ask Marrow, ask heart. You have learned grease and panels and the grammar of down. The day has taught your hands what the night will ask them to trust. The train has said something in a language you are only starting to hear. And in the mingling of relief and curiosity where fear used to be, you realize this chapter's quiet plot has only tightened. A rivet that drifts after years, 3 breaths where there should be none. A heart that speaks through other bodies. The train does not stop, but it is thinking about something. And for the first time since you stepped aboard, you suspect it might be thinking about you. Morning does not arrive so much as it unclenches. After the black mouth, the lamps come up by inches, the floor forgets the hollow note, and the windows relearn how to carry a color that isn't black. People move with the quiet thrift of those who were awake together in the dark and have decided, without voting, to spend their voices carefully. The board has changed while you slept a handful of minutes. Under rumor, 3 neat lines, tripled slow in mouth, confirmed, viewport safe, port rivet 4, R drift. Someone, Reader, by the tidy handwriting, has added a 4th in a different chalk. Towers run at second bell. Rin appears with a strip of bread fattened by a little grease and an apple shaving that tastes like a promise the train didn't have to make and did anyway. Today we pass, he says around his pride. The nets will fly. You think you understand pass, but the net wagon teaches the grammar of it. Its roof hatch yawns to the grey light. 2 nets lie coiled like patient beasts, their ropes rubbed with ash so they won't burn their own hands on the catch. Along the roof rim sit iron shoes, rollers polished by years of pull. The team is small. A young man with a bite mark scar who moves like gravity owes him interest. 2 kids big enough to be brave but not heavy enough to hurt anyone if the rope decides to tell a bad joke. And Jen from the stoves, sleeves rolled to elbows, stance wide. Reader watches from below with the stillness of a lighthouse, hands behind her back. The signal for the tower's run isn't a whistle or a bell. It's the sky throwing its first pail toward the west-facing windows, the hour that means the trackside outposts have had time to untie their sacks and lean their poles to the rails. No one believes in stations. Everyone believes in other people who do not stop. Before the nets, Marrow intercepts you with the finger crooked toward the door with the tin plate heart. 2 minutes, he says, which on his tongue means do not touch anything, not even the air. He walks you through a vestibule that smells of iron damp with effort and into a room that makes language brief. The heart car is not vast, it is dense. Flywheels stand like moons leashed to axles. A governor spins its paired weights in a small, stubborn dance that regulators have danced since steam learned to call itself discipline. Coils of copper glitter darkly where dynamos convert motion to forgiveness. The sound here is not loud. It is concentrated. Layers of hum that beat against each other until they smooth into a single long note in your bones. Listen, Morrow says, and that is the only permission you get. He points with his chin to a pressure gauge whose needle rides just below a mark painted in somebody's grandparent's hand, to a linkage that shivers and then rests, to a pendulum that keeps time not with the rails but with something deeper. 3 easings last night, he says softly, leaning so the governor's weights pass his nose by the width of a coin. Not grade. Not pity. Heart kept us safer than we deserved. He doesn't look at you. We are not supposed to have opinions about that. He throws the door open himself, as if cleanliness of air were a sacrament, and you are returned to human scale. Reader is waiting with a folded square of oiled cloth and a plan drawn in strokes you can follow. We light in port in car 11, she says. We move water and metal to starboard until the drift is answered. We will not fix the rivet at speed. We will hold it steady while the train thinks. She glances at your hands. You carry light and weight. A moving city rearranges itself with the efficiency of a school of fish. Anna from water shunts 3 jars with a hip and a breath. Jen and the bite mark man exchange sides with a crate of stove stones that should, by rights, be walls. Harker marks the floor with chalk, short bars like musical notes. Mass here, then here, then here. Children become ballast by making a line of themselves on the safe bench. 9 small bodies equals 1 anvil. They are scandalized and proud to discover they can weigh the same as something the workshop respects. A boy named Omi counts out loud to help the timing. We move on 5. We breathe on 6. Over your head, bundles on high racks slide a notch along rails that used to hold luggage for vacations and now hold a different kind of future. You and Rin return to the viewport cavity to finish what the night began. The ladder is obedient now. The doubled strap sits parentally across the rungs. The rivet Maro side-eyed is a blunt metal pupil in a painted eyelid. Rin fishes a dog plate from his runner's bundle, a flat of steel with 2 holes offset. Not a cure, he says with the embarrassed authority of someone repeating doctrine he didn't write. A hug. He seats the plate over the rivet head, and a sister hole on good steel threads 2 stove bolts through, and you feel the car's skin accept the embrace with the smallest, truest change in tone. A hug is not childish in his mouth. It is a tool. Lael arrives with the leather punch and 3 fresh straps. She threads a secondary belt over belt, so even failure will have to trip over company. She hangs a tiny bell inside the cavity, high and tucked, rigged to chime if the ladder decides to practice independence. Only once, she says. If it rings, we don't argue with it. We stop moving minds, even if the train refuses to stop moving wheels. The second bell, 2 clipped knocks on a pipe that everyone hears without turning their heads, means the towers are near. The net wagon crew climbs, clips, and kneels in their practiced prayer. The trackside outposts appear like mirages, bony towers lofting, each with a figure in a quilted coat and a hat that looks like a badger made peace with a circle. They hold long poles with hooks, over which sacks dangle like fruit that grew on speed. The train does not slow. The train exhales in time with the men and women on the towers, and the moment of the pass becomes one bright hinge. "Throw!" said the scar-armed young man, and the nets leap forward, catching 2 sacks each with a hollow whoomp. Ropes sing, rollers bow, the crew leans back, swallowing impact with legs. Jen's laugh is a flash of tin. A sack snags on a pole's nail and opens at the seam. Apples spray the roof like marbles made of autumn. A child below gasps the exact sound a century made when it remembered harvest. Jen's hand finds the quick-release knot. The net opens like a turn of the world, and the torn sack tumbles, apples following their own simple physics along the roofline into a waiting trough you did not know existed. 3 make it to the hatch. Reader plucks them out of the air without flair, as if her palms belonged to gravity's union. In the net is not only food. There are brake shoes made from composite that promises to play well with iron. There is a coil of copper thin enough to be precious. There is cloth, tire cord new enough to be arrogant. And there is a tin with a lid painted red and X'd, formal as an envelope. Reader opens it at the board without traveling her feet. Everyone else follows the contents like cargo. Inside lies a strip of zinc with a stencil rushed onto it. 3 ladder glyphs painted one above the other in matte white. Not a misty duck here, but a formal expect 3. The back is marked with a notch cut by chisel. Tower script for subsidence, Anna whispers near your ear, as if to remind herself she knows how to read land she cannot touch. On top of it, someone has written in the tower people's field hand, "Hold what can be held." Harka taps the warning ribbon on the board with a knuckle. "We heard that," she says. The heart said the same thing without paint. Maro nods as if conceding that engines and people sometimes learn one another's language by accident. Redistribution becomes sacrament. The market folds shut and becomes corridor for weight on the march. The school closes its books and opens its benches to bodies, left side only, no wiggling. The clinic binds 2 jars of saline together and straps them above their usual shelf, because weight higher for this mile is worse than weight low. The house of small repairs mends on its knees so the needles add less to the port count. In the stove car, flames are trimmed until the color says, "We will not sway our heat to the wrong side." In the brake house, the men with thick wrists lay their palms on the levers and tell them, nicely, how to behave. Reader explains the oddest of train rituals to you with a voice tuned to sit under the rails. The counterwalk. At her cue, when the chalk circles by your name align with the red mark by mile, the able-bodied in 6 cars will walk in a narrow loop against the train's direction. Starboard side only. 2 steps forward. 1 pause. Repeat. So that moving mass does not court the flex the hills send up the rails today. "We look ridiculous," she admits, and her mouth makes a private smile. "And we like not dying." You counterwalk then. You and a line of men and women whose names are pegs on a board, who wear washer coins for work already promised, who whisper the counting song to keep feet honest. 2 steps, small and exact. 1 pause. A hand to the rail when the train reconsiders its posture. A glance to Lael standing by the viewport cavity, listening for the bell you pray will not speak. The first region of soft ground announces itself not with a view, you have none, but with a change in the train's grammar. Sound grays. Vibration widens. The car's bones remember they were put together by other hands a long time ago and decide bravely to continue believing it. The 3 slow breaths come, not from pity, not from fear, but from intent. The heart eases pull, holds all that can be held, eases again. You feel it in the soles of your feet as if the world itself had decided to help carry you. Down, calls a watcher 3 cars ahead. First ladder, the word travels. Down, calls another, second ladder. Bodies fold and unfold, a wave inside a wave. Down, says your mouth without waiting for your brain. Third ladder, as painted as promised. The dog plate above the rivet does its modest work. The doubled strap does its fathering. The bell does not sing. The nets go out again to catch a second pass. This time sandbags, small, packed by tower hands that know exactly how much a human can carry at a walk when the world wants to steal balance. They are tossed starboard to the porches that become shelves in a breath. Kids become cranes. Anna counts the bags as if she were counting heartbeats. Sand is weight in a polite form, willing to be moved twice in a day and not complain. It takes 8 minutes to cross a mile that would take 2 in honest ground. No one keeps a clock on it. Everyone carries the knowledge in their mouth like a seed for later. The car exhales when the rails relearn hardness. The walls drop a fraction of an inch back toward vertical. Harka puts her ear to the floor and closes her eyes the way a person thanks a thing that is not a person. Reader takes the zinc strip with its triple ladders and pins it beneath the red ribbon on the board for others to see, and for the memory of hands not present to borrow courage. In the workshop, Maro stashes the new shoes and the coil of copper. He flips a ledger to a page where he lists debts to towers in a script that has no numbers for money. 24 buttons at harvest, a small load of stone when ground eats the ties, a song at night for the west tower if the wind is in the wrong mood, washer coins good against future grease. He adds, 1 dog plate returned when stop is invented. A joke and not a joke. When the net team climbs down, apples in a bowl appear as if they had grown in metal. Reader raises an eyebrow at the extravagance and then, because moderation is also a discipline, breaks one into 6 with a knife she does not flaunt. Children's eyes learn what patience looks like in an adult's hand. The pieces taste like the train went through autumn and kept a souvenir. You scrub your palms at a basin bolted to a post. The water is rationed and honest. It smells faintly of the skin of cans and the ghost of lemons sacrificed to soap. Your fingers remember the jar of light's heat. Your wrists remember the small pull of the counterwalk. Your shoulders remember how much weight a dog plate weighs if you believe in it too hard. The ache is not complaint. It is receipt. At the viewport, Lael checks the bell, frowns at it for theater, and then relents. Good bell, she decides, and puts a tiny thread around it to make it feel seen. Children take 2-breath turns at the porch and say hello to the world as if it had personally wronged them by being big. The House of Small Repairs receives 3 socks that became holes rather than wearing them and mends them into socks again. The stove, given back its flame, preens in blue like someone who knows how to behave in company. The Breakhouse men put names to the hill in their mouths, names the board does not carry, because the board prefers facts and the Breakhouse prefers stories. At the end of the car, Reader hangs the painted zinc strip where warnings live when they become promises we kept. She writes under it, small, in her precise teacher's hand. Held, she underlines it once. Morrow, passing, reads it, opens his mouth as if to argue, closes it because arguing with accuracy wastes oil. Harka adds a line to the list of squeaks that is not a squeak at all. Song honest after soft ground. Heart spoke thrice, and then was satisfied. Beside it she writes a list of things that never made a sound, and ought to be thanked anyway. Dog plate behaved, strap remembered, bell remained polite. People held each other correctly. Rin collapses onto a bench with the boneless grace of the young. He kicks off one shoe and shows you where a rivet pushed a small bruise into his little toe. Battle scar, he declares, and Harka, passing, taps his forehead with one knuckle. Language, she says. Your toe lost an argument with a rivet. The battle is elsewhere. He salutes with both hands and then, because he has been almost heroic all day, he falls asleep for 8 minutes with his head against the viewport wall, mouth open, breath fogging a tiny circle he'll pretend not to be proud of later. Reader brings you the chalk. Under shift, she says. Your name goes again beside watch, but she adds a symbol you haven't seen. 3 stacked dashes, meaning kept count while counting counted. It isn't a title, she says, reading your hesitation. It's a memory hook. Tomorrow, when someone asks you about today, you will have the right words to give them and not the wrong ones. The day eases its jaw. On the far car, someone shakes dust from a runner's belt and the dust leaves obediently, as if out of respect for what the belt carried. In a corner of the school, Lael draws the triple ladder from the zinc onto the map of the train. Not in the tunnel where ladders usually live, but on an empty patch of canvas. She labels it elsewhere, which is funny and true. You lie on a bench that remembers all backs equally and feel the train's long note find the bones behind your ears. The board's red ribbon hangs with its new companion. The heart has spoken in the language of pause. The towers have answered in the language of paint. The car has answered in the language of weight and straps and walking the wrong way on purpose. The rivet hasn't moved since the hug. The bell has refused to learn how to ring. You would not have believed in this kind of day before the train taught you how to hold it. Now you count it among the kinds of mercy that do not announce themselves. Mass moved, a plate tightened, a word passed down a corridor at the right moment, a breath eased by a machine that isn't supposed to care. Night will come with its own dialect. For now the wagons breathe. The map on the school wall grows one private symbol richer. And somewhere in the heart car, a governor's waits continue their domestic waltz, indifferent to gratitude, devoted to doing almost nothing at exactly the right time. By late day, the train feels taller, as if carrying its own attention. The zinc strip with 3 painted ladders hangs under the red ribbon on the board like a warning and a thank you. Under shift, your name appears again beside watch, and a new sign reader adds in small, square chalk. 3 short bars stacked. kept count while counting counted. It is not rank. It is the kind of memory you can hang tools on. Work folds itself into evening chores with the neatness of a seam. Nets are uncoiled on the floor of the net wagon and inspected strand by strand. Rope burns whisper their history along your palms. Jen shows you how to read a splice by the way it sighs when you twist it. A good splice doesn't argue, she says. It accepts. She slides the twine through with a sailmaker's needle, lips pursed, eyes somewhere between rope and sky. Apples saved from the roof sit in a wooden bowl that used to be a brake drum. Children orbit it like planets that have heard rumors of sugar. In the workshop, the day's heat has fallen to a diligent warmth. The generator belt hums that honest note Morrow loves like a favorite key. He lifts a guard with 2 fingers and watches a pulley with the patience of a doctor checking a pulse. Governor is true, he says to no one, and then to you because you happen to be there. When the heart eases, everything that is not confident tries to confess. Better now than on a span, he replaces the guard and wipes the edge of the metal as if it had made the first move toward a covenant. Harka kneels with her hand flat on the floor in the school car, head bowed as if the rails were telling a secret only polite ears should hear. She shows you the 2-finger test for a hotbox at human distances. 2 fingers to the iron, 1 heartbeat, 2 if you're brave. If you must pull away quickly, you fetch oil. If you can count to 3, you fetch patience. We have no sensors except people, she says, and people are good if you train them like instruments. She takes your wrist and places your hand on the pipe the way a teacher would place a bow on a violin. Do you feel that thinner note? That's the grade receding. The train is remembering level reader has turned the school map into a ledger of weight by chalk hatchings, a block of diagonal lines on starboard where water jars now live, a rectangle of dots where sandbags wait to be moved if the next soft ground asks for help. She writes, counterwalk, mile 241 to 243, starboard only, and then, in a different hand beside it, someone adds, practice, 2 steps, pause, breathe. The children stand and do it once, solemnly, a parade of small legs learning the grammar of not swerving the world. In the house of small repairs, 2 elders mend the net skirts and laugh in whispers at an old story about a rope that thought it was clever. Lael sits with them, punching neat holes in 3 leather straps, her face wearing the expression of someone who takes kindness as seriously as math. She threads a bell string with a single red thread among the fibers. If it rings, she says when you ask, we obey the bell instead of our hope. She drops her voice and adds, some people pretend hope is a tool. It is a song. Tools are for hands. The market is open 1 last hour before evening asks it to become hallway. Washer coins clink like the quietest rain. A jar of buttons changes ownership twice in 5 minutes and ends in the school with reader, which is to say the buttons have been traded for stories children will believe, and that is a fair market. A woman offers a hinge that remembers how to be true for 1 small length of copper wire that wants to learn how to be useful. Someone has laid out a line of fish hooks hammered from umbrella ribs. They gleam like small futures. Trade here feels less like hunger and more like keeping the train's dozen separate hearts in the same chest. Anna from Water moves along the coil stills with the intimacy of a nurse changing bandages. She collects the day's salt into a dish as if counting a currency that believes in patience. We live inside a closed mouth, she mentions, as if placing a spare jar back on its shelf. Every drop that doesn't come back is a story we can't keep telling. She writes a faint line under water on the board and adds 2 jars forward to starboard, 1 jar back to clinic. When she leaves, the stills continue their slow moral work, drip by counted drip. Dinner conjures itself along the aisle between someone's elbow and someone else's knee. Porridge becomes stew by honorary declaration. The thin meat in it turns rumor into flavor. Bread from last night rehearses crispness over a stove that knows how to behave in company. A child holds an apple section high as if it were a photograph of a harvest. It goes into 6 parts without complaint. The room smells like starch and metal, and a brief rescue of time from a pot reader keeps by a lamp. Not because basil is a luxury, but because it helps the air remember it can be gentle. They do not say meeting, they say listening, and everyone understands where to go. The board carriage grows a perimeter of backs and hands not touching, not jittering, simply abiding. Reader stands, chalk in one hand, the other palm empty. Morrow leans with the elegance of a man who trusts his legs. Harka sits cross-legged because the floor is a page for her and she doesn't read standing up. Jen and the net crew are here, sleeves still lightly sticky with apple. Reader puts what everyone knows into words that can hold weight. The towers sent us the triple ladder, she says, touching the zinc. They marked subsidence, the ground here is unsettled and loud. The heart spoke in thrice, easing pull 3 times where the rails forgot their duty. The port rivet at the viewport drifted after years of loyal silence. All those are small and not small. She writes 3 bullets, then circles them into a clover. It means nothing. She waits for breath to settle. And it means prepare to deserve safety. What will the rails ask? Jen asks without looking up from her hands. Still song, Harka replies, the word falling out like a squared nail. Not counterwalk. The opposite. No sway. No clink. No bang. We will strip sound until only the train's voice remains. No mugs hanging. No tool swinging. We lash the small to the larger and the larger to the floor. We strip the car of correctable exclamation. Maro nods. Heart will hold again, I think. But we can't ask it to do our job. He meets your eye. He must have noticed the way you look at the heart like a shrine, because he softens his tone by half. Engines adore discipline, not devotion. Reader assigns with a brisk charity that feels like a good rain. A Harka on the floor, Morrow between brake and heart, Jen on nets, coiled tight, no snag to become decision. Anna at coil stills, tighten lids, leave breath to the pipes only. Lael at viewport bell and strap. Rin, you run with, she glances to you, watcher and carry light. We will dim by thirds, lamps to ember, then to ember's memory, span. Someone asks from the back, a word no one wrote on the board because writing is one kind of power and should not be used too freely. Old Span if the rail stories are honest, Harka says. It sings in open vowels. The undernote goes from room to roof. You will hear it even if you only have one ear. Rin elbows you gently like an older brother asking if you remember to be ready. Span means we pretend to be furniture, he whispers. And we trust people who have older ears. Before the dim comes, the train invents 10 more chores to make the night easier to carry. Socks are looped over lines, not draped, so they won't answer the car with their own independent weather. Spoons come off hooks and go into pockets. A child collects glass marbles from the floor as carefully as if he were picking up the moon in pieces. Each marble that doesn't roll is a future that doesn't slip. The house of small repairs gathers 3 dangling threads and persuades them into obedience, because the smallest dangle can become a story at the wrong moment. Someone ties a handkerchief around the bicycle bell in the stairwell so it won't volunteer punctuation. In the stove car, Jen teaches fire to mind its vowels: blue, not green, steady, not thirsty. She places a tin of sand on the edge of the stove as if seating a quiet judge. Just in case, she tells you. Sand is the polite way to end an argument. She lowers the wick a fraction and the flame nods once, as if acknowledging the train's need for a single voice. Rin takes you on one last run before stillness to check the lashings. A universe of small straps now narrating the car, each with a knot that learned not to confess under changing rhythm. He fingers each knot as if reading by touch. If you don't know a knot, he instructs you with rehearsed gravity, tie a lot. He smiles at his own joke and then repeats, serious, but know a knot. The lights drop their shoulders. Lamps along the aisle become coals in their iron cages. The board chalk refuses to glare, it simply waits. People lower their centers of gravity, not by crouching, but by deciding their heels belong to the floor more than they belong to thought. The train seems to approve. It tightens its song by a half tone, as if tuning to an evening pitch. Still song, Rita says, and the word passes through 6 cars as a breeze passes through leaves, when leaves have chosen to be one thing. Movement becomes exact, then minimal, then optional. Even the talking lowers itself into the well of the ear so that it won't slosh. You take your post at the viewport with Lael and an older woman whose shoulders say she used to carry sacks you couldn't lift with a friend. The leather strap crosses your chest. You pull it twice because the chalk said twice. Lael fingers the bell string once, not to test the bell, but to rehearse how not to touch it by accident. "Oh, we listen first, then look," she reminds the 3 of you. Span leads with sound. Forward, the rails change their mind about what they want to be. The undernote goes from room to roof, just as Harka promised. The car's breath opens into a long, careful vowel. There is no grade here, only air under iron and distance beneath that air. The heart eases once and you feel the car become more a word than a weight. It eases again. The sway left to right meets the sway front to back, and they exchange nods instead of handshakes. It eases a 3rd time. Under your palm, the window's steel frame becomes an instrument that prefers being played very softly. "A down," calls a watcher 2 cars ahead at the first low beam painted with an honest ladder. Duck, lift, accept. Down again for the second. Down for the third, exactly as promised, exactly as painted on the zinc. The train behaves like a person who has decided to make a plan and then keep it. The bell does not ring. The dog plate does its decent job. The strap is embarrassingly reliable. In the pause between beams, the open space under the car pulls at hearing the way black water pulls at sight. You think of the towers, their painted ladder script. You think of the list of squeaks with its new not squeak lines. You think of heart easings like a hand on a back saying, "Steady now." You imagine rivers where rivers once were and where they still are in another grammar. Somewhere below, air feels cold in the way that implies depth. "Hold," Lael whispers, not to you, to herself, to the bell, to the strap, to the tiny muscles at the base of the skull that want to narrate panic. You obey the whisper as if it were law. Something new happens. Not a sound, not a jolt, but a tone laid under the tone. A second sympathetic hum that wanders in from the far car and checks if it can live in your chest. Harka answers it with 3 taps on a pipe, measured and polite. The second tone decides to go bother the brake shoe instead. In the brake house, 2 men grin without showing teeth. Their hands do not move, and restraint feels like profession. You feel yourself wanting to look down. You don't. You look forward, where the dark raises its chin and then, almost shyly, gives back a fringe of lighter gray. The car under your hands changes vowel again. Roof becomes room becomes road. The old span is behind the train in the precise way that past becomes story on rails, instantly and with enough residue to be discussed for a lifetime. The lamps creep up 1 notch. Still song lessons. Mugs return to hooks. Spoons remember their small voices. Someone lets a laugh slip out and then catches it gently and sets it down. Reader's palm lands on your shoulder in a weight-light way that communicates here rather than good. Lael ties a thread of red around the bell's string like a ribbon on a citizen who behaved in a crisis. Rin appears with hands you can tell he sat on all the way across the span to teach them humility. He offers you water that tastes like the opposite of fear. "Look," Anna says, pointing, not at the board, not at the rivet, not at any of the things that have been holding your attention, but through the side pane where a slit of sky grants a view of the far distance in one place only. For an instant, while the train and the world agree on angles, you see a tower on the next line, a person on its perch raising a long pole in a lazy salute. They are too far to be detailed, too close to be myth. You lift your hand without thinking, then realize the glass and the speed make the gesture a ritual rather than a conversation, and that is enough. Back at the board, Reader writes 3 small words under warning, and then, in a gesture you will not forget, draws 1 quiet line beneath them. Span past held. Maro leans in, reads the handwriting, and lets out a breath he had not publicized. Harka writes on the list of squeaks, not crossing anything out this time. Heart's thrice easings matched ground's lack. We matched both. Under that, she adds a postscript in a hand you now recognize even from across a moving room. teach the new ones the difference between hope and a strap. The room loosens its belt. The market becomes market again for 15 minutes so a man can trade 2 washer coins for a handful of tea leaves that remember rain. The house of small repairs puts away needles like putting away sentences. Children, released from stillness, make a brave chorus for 3 notes and then, by the mercy of reader's raised eyebrow, turn the chorus into a hum. Rin drops beside you on the bench like a bundled rope finally set down. He offers you a coin punched from scrap with a notch at the edge, his name scratched into it with what must have been a nail. "Washer for a watcher," he says, pleased with the phrase and embarrassed by the gift. "Don't spend it. Keep it. So you remember you survived your first real night. You turn the coin in your fingers and it warms as if metal could agree with sentiment." In the quiet after the span, the train returns to the fact of itself with a humility you haven't learned how to name yet. The dog plate above the rivet remains decent. The bell does not audition for a part it wasn't given. The heart sings one honest note with nothing braided into it. Somewhere a spoon resumes its small job with a clink that means we are ordinary again, which is the highest possible achievement. Later, when the lamps are thumbed to the level that makes books look patient, reader stops by your place in the corridor with a page torn from a notebook. On it, a sketch of the zinc strip with the triple ladders, the words, "Hold what can be held," and 3 empty squares. "We fill them when the train teaches us a new way to obey that sentence," she says. Tonight we fill one. She marks the first square with a dot. "You'll get to add another one day, if you keep your ears and your tools in the same pocket. You close your eyes on metal that has decided to call itself sleep. If you listen closely, you can still hear the span's wide vowel lingering under your ribs like a note that doesn't want to leave the room. The train does not stop. But tonight it taught you that not stopping can be a craft rather than a curse. And just before you slide into the part of rest that has no pictures, you think of the line reader drew under span past held, and you understand that plot, on a train that never pauses, moves not by place but by practice, by what you learn to hold, and when you choose to be still. Afternoon brings a weather the board doesn't list in letters, only in a smear of red chalk drawn like a thumb across the day. The air begins to taste like coins. Hair along forearms lifts as if listening harder would help. Reader writes 2 words anyway, red weather, and taps them once with the chalk as if to pin the air to the page. Jen snuffs the extra wicks in the stove car. Anna ties oiled cloth over 3 vents with the calm of someone putting children's hats on before rain. "You'll smell it first," Morrow says, already halfway out of the workshop doorway, a length of chain looped over his shoulder like a serious necklace. "And then you'll hear it in the lamps." He doesn't wait for questions. He does not explain static or dust or the way dry wind teaches metal to argue with itself. He hooks the chain to a bracket under the floor and feeds the loose belly of it through a slot toward the sleepers, iron knuckles ready to kiss stone. "And we make a path," he says to the train more than to you. Argue downwards, not sideways. The market closes early without being told. Counters fold up like breathing creatures deciding to be ribs again. The jar of buttons goes to the school not for trade, but because children should have color when the sky loses its manners. The house of small repairs becomes the house of necessary cloth. Oiled rags, tape, 2 coils of line, a cloth bag of copper tacks that look guilty before they do anything wrong. Lael threads a red thread through each cloth corner, this side up, so in the dim no one will fight a square that won't help. Harka lays a palm to the floor and then lifts it, regards a small constellation of grit on her skin, as if the grit, properly arranged, would confess the future. "It's a skin weather," she says. "Not a lung weather. We'll keep air moving and ask dust to pass through without introductions." She chalks 3 low circles on the board underwater and adds lids tight. Thin sips, mint oil if mouths complain. Mero in the clinic sets out a small dish of mint and salt next to a row of tin cups, the kind of medicine that works by teaching the tongue a different story than panic. The coil stills get their own sermon. Anna checks each lid twice, then presses her cheek to the glass bellies as if listening through skin can hear what ears can't. "A drip count will slow," she says, not alarmed, only precise. "Hey, we lend patience, water returns it tomorrow." You and Rin are given work with no prestige and real effect. Lashings. The straps you tightened last night receive an extra half turn. The new bell above the viewport gets a loop of thread tied just so fingers won't read it as a handle in the dark. The dog plate over the drifting rivet accepts 2 witness marks in chalk, thin lines across bolt head to plate, plate to skin, so any shift later will be honest about it. "We are not suspicious," Rin declares to the metal with the dignity of a boy practicing adulthood. "We are attentive." Then the red weather steps aboard without asking. Lamps go paler by a breath, then recover. Fabric along rails whispers. A dry hiss begins in the places where nothing should hiss. Door tracks, drawer runners, the seam in the floor that knows better. The roof's skin makes a sound like paper taught to sing. Marrow's chain begins its faint commentary under the car, soft, irregular zist as it licks the sleepers and gives the extra charge a polite place to go. Reader moves like a lighthouse, not everywhere, but where timing matters. She shows 3 children how to tape a window seam without bubbles. She shows a man how to hold a door so the latch kisses its catch instead of striking it. Weight, not force. She pinches a lamp's wire where it trembles and the lamp remembers etiquette. "Stillsong earlier taught us a voice," she says, not loudly. "We use it now but without silence. We stay normal on purpose. The school becomes a small parliament of attention. Children sit with their feet tucked, palms on knees, learning how not to add their own weather to the room. Reader opens the relic case and lifts out the bent bolt shaped like a question mark. "This is what we ask when we don't know and can't stop to find out," she tells them. We let the question be a tool instead of a hole. She turns to the map and draws a thin red line along 6 cars, cloths up, and a second along 3, cloths optional. She nods to you. "Watch her carry light. If the lamps stutter, you stand where the window needs a steady. You expect fear to gnaw at voices. It doesn't. It nibbles at small things, fidgety hands, a laugh that lands a bit too sharp, a spoon that forgets it's not a bell. But the train has too much practice to give fear a seat. Lael walks the aisle with a small brush, dusting the marks Harka chalked on the floor earlier, and somehow that foolishly gentle act convinces your ribs to sit down. The net crew stays on the ground. No roof work when the air tries to rub you into sparks. Jen refuses to be idle and therefore invents a job. She rubs the stove's body with a cloth dipped in water and salt, making a skin across the iron so static we'll choose elsewhere. Old ship trick, she says, half to herself. Old kitchen trick, too. Salt teaches everything to put its feet down. A lamp in the break house blinks twice. Wrong. The men don't look up. They stop their hands for a half second so you will notice they noticed. Maro arrives as if pulled by a string. He presses the switch against its plate with his thumb in that intimate way he has with disobedient things. The lamp chooses to remember circuit. Not now, Maro tells it. Not good timing, the lamp agrees. Outside, the red weather knows exactly how far to overstay without becoming a crisis. Dust turns to thread, turns to a wrung towel, and then loosens. The lamps stop the small game they were playing. The roof paper goes mute. The chain under the carriage loses its venom and returns to being iron pretending to be a rope. Reader walks the length of the bored car with an ear like a spoon in a glass. She hears nothing sufficient to write. If she writes anyway, small. Red weather past, mood normal, lids held, no bell. The zinc strip with the triple ladders sits beside this new line like a cousin at a funeral who keeps everyone from crying by being beautifully ordinary. Evening turns up in an untheatrical way. The market opens for 15 minutes, not commerce as appetite, but repairs to the web that work rides on. A hinge finds a home. A string of washer coins travels from a pocket that has enough to a pocket that will do something useful with them. A hand changes hands without being noticed except by the two hands involved. Reader puts 3 buttons in the palm of a small boy whose job was to collect marbles off the floor earlier. This buys you 1 story, 2 listens, she says. He nods as if very wealthy. Dinner tastes faintly of smoke and mint and the buttery ghost of a pan that once knew butter. Someone finds a jar with 3 olives in brine older than 2 of the children. The olives become 12 pieces. Laughter becomes 6 notes. One of the break house men sings a short song not about rails or weather, but about a pocket that had a hole and a woman who sewed it without comment so a man's day would stop falling through it. Everyone recognizes themselves a little and doesn't say so. They do not hold festivals, but they do hold names, which is a ceremony so unassuming you almost miss when it begins. When a person earns a duty that shapes a day instead of a moment, they are given a name to wear when the train talks about them. Tonight, Reader picks up a small strip of stamped tin and calls Lael by her child name. Lael steps forward, chin level, hands clean, eyes still large and exact. "Are you here?" Reader says. "You do not decorate your fear. You bring bells and straps and leave your hope at the door when it isn't useful." She fastens the tin to Lael's strap. Lael watch. No applause. The strap thumps gently when Lael moves, as if agreeing. Rin, reader adds, and for once his bravado peels back to show tendon. She holds up a washer with a small notch filed just so and threads it onto his runner's belt. Rin step, she says. Because you make the step for the person behind you. He touches the notch the way one touches a forehead in thought, not devotion. He looks at you and grins crooked. Washer for a watcher, he whispers back the joke from last night. And you both pretend it is new because that's what friendship does with good lines. The lamps lower one notch toward humility. No black mouth tonight, no span. The board does not carry a red ribbon. And yet the train insists on being interesting. A low pulse, different from grade, different from wind, different from the sly static of the afternoon, moves up through the floor like a cat testing a lap. Harker is on it first, palm to pipe, head tilted. Coupla song, she says. Not ours. Back car, 2 couplers down. She looks at Morrow. Morrow looks at the list. The list doesn't yet have a line for this. The chalk prepares to earn its keep. Rin is already up, belt on, mouth closed. Runners don't run with words. Reader lifts the jar of light from its hook without ceremony and puts it in your hands. Carry, she says. You hear different things than we do. That is useful, Lael follows, because bells and straps are her job now, and because her face is not finished being 7 in some ways, and entirely finished in others. The night car's breath is different, deeper, less peopled. In the gangway, the world is all moving lines and a draft that has learned to be courteous. 2 couplers back, the song sharpens to something between a scrape and a plea. Rin kneels and presses his ear to the socket housing. Dry, he says. Not a lot. Enough to get ideas. He holds his palm under the mushroom oil cup, looks at you and nods to the little brass cap. You unscrew it, the threads gritting in that polite way brass remembers, and Rin dips a rag into the grease jar and feeds the coupler in a circle while the train tries to decide if it minds being fed. No grabbing, he repeats his earlier litany, soft. The sound turns from tooth on tooth to tooth on cloth to tooth, remembering its job. Lael, because she is watch now and because she is 7, lays a finger lightly to the metal and approves. It would be nothing, a line on the list, a shrug, except that as you go to replace the cap, you notice the witness mark you and Rin chalked by the viewport earlier. One of the thin chalk lines across the dog plate has drifted a hair's width. Not much. Not panic, but honest. You lay your finger to the plate and you can feel the faintest grumble you did not feel before. Reader, you say when you return, and the word carries a shape that brings silence into the space around it. You show the mark. Harka studies it long enough that patience becomes action. Morrow looks at the board, then at the word drift, then at the heart door as if calculating the correct tithe to pay before he asks it a question. We move water back, Reader says instantly, to starboard less, to port more, by jars, by benches, by bodies on a different side of the school's long seat. We will not bully it, she adds, and her tone suggests she means both the rivet and the night. We will escort it back to liking us. Children carry one jar between two, pride in the careful slosh. The counterwalk is not required. The still song is not required. This is a smaller craft. A tilt, a breath, a held hallway, a strap checked twice by a new watch whose tin tag has barely warmed to body. The dog plate settles into the skin again with a small, yes, your ears can't hear, but your chest somehow does. Harka listens at the floor and pronounces the vowel correct. Maro doesn't let it go at that. He draws 3 short notes under your line on the list and writes in his tidy not much of a hand, heart easings yesterday, rivet today, port tonight. Pattern is a polite animal. We will learn its leash. Beside it he adds, ask towers for cold rivets and bucking bar. If they have the right steel and more hands than we do, we'll double our hug in daylight. He looks up, catches your eye, and allows the smallest concession. You did right to see. Eye first, tool second night agrees to be ordinary again. A small draft on the stairwell remembers its work as a messenger and no longer tries to be a haunting. The lamps keep steady. The chain under the carriage, bored with virtue, rides quiet. Someone, somewhere, finds a mouth organ and breathes 2 notes that sound like a laugh didn't want to wake anyone. In the school, Reader ties a red thread across the corner of the zinc strip where the triple ladders live. A bookmark, not a warning. In the break house, one of the men tells a story about a time a coupler tried to teach him a lesson, and he learned it before it got rude. You lie back on a bench that has memorized generosity. The jar of light cools by your hand. Rin sleeps 5 minutes at a slant only he could invent. Lael sits upright longer than anyone would ask of a 7-year-old watch, and then, with perfect dignity, curls on her side so that her tin tag doesn't press into bone. Harka's hand on the floor becomes a kind of punctuation at the end of the day's sentence. Maro, before he disappears into whatever niche he keeps near the heart, writes 1 more line on the board in small letters no one will see until morning. If we must ask for the bar, ask also for patience. Reader dims the last lamp with 2 fingers, the gesture of someone who believes ending a day is as important as beginning it. The train holds its single long note. It is not happiness. It is not victory. It is competence extended into the dark. Here is what you understand as sleep finds its shape. You would not last a day here not for lack of bravery, but for lack of this ability to read a weather from the taste of metal, to move a jar and move a fate, to mark one hair-width drift and call it story instead of accident. The train has begun telling you a longer thing in its own language. 3 easings, a ladder, a span, a red weather, a rivet that wants attention and will behave if loved with steel. You will learn the next part in daylight, likely from a tower hand with a bucking bar and a coil of new rivets tied to a pole. For now, breathing is a craft and sleep is a duty. The car takes your weight as if it had planned for you all along. The night instructed spends itself without incident. Morning keeps its promise in small ways. The lamps don't flicker when they climb a notch. The floor forgets last night's wary vowel, and the jar by the viewport bell is dry because no one cried in the dark. On the board, under rumor, a new line in tower hand, kit on poles, 3rd run, cold rivets, bucking bar, dolly snap. Tell heart hello. Reader pins the strip beside the triple ladder zinc as if the two were cousins at a family table. Harka draws a quiet tick under it that means we asked and the world answered. The net crew opens the roof and uncoils the day's nerve. Ropes are rubbed with ash to keep them honest. Jen tests her knot on a loop the way old sailors check weather. Palms, not eyes. No roof walking, she says, though no one suggested it. The red weather made its point yesterday. We catch and we keep to floor. The towers appear at second bell, stilted up out of emptiness, each a ribs and ladder skeleton holding a person against the wind. Poles lean over the right-of-way with parcels like fruit too disciplined to fall. "Throw!" says the scar-armed man, and the nets leap. Sacks thump the webbing, swing, swear once, and come quiet. Rita hauls a tin tied in red string through the hatch. Inside, greased canvas wraps a bar, a short anvil with a palm-worn face, a handful of soft steel rivets kept oily in a jar, a peening snap with a cup for doming heads, and a note scrawled with a carpenter's pencil. Cold set only, no heat on the skin. Strike on longs. Keep backs to beamside. Ladder ahead, not today but soon. Hold what can be held. Maro runs his thumb along the bucking bar's face and smiles with the tiny private relief mechanics allow themselves when steel arrives that knows how to behave. "I will do it while the song is straight," he says. Flat run after the grade. No curve. We strike on the longs and keep the Hessian sack behind the panel to catch ideas if they try to leave. Preparation is its own liturgy. The school empties one bench and slides it against the viewport wall to make a kneeling place that won't argue. Anna loosens lids a quarter turn so the coil stills won't add their own hisses when hands need to hear metal. Jen lays sandbags under the wall skin 2 bays down to make a duller world for sound to travel through. Harka chalks the floor with 2 quiet marks. Sway here and still here, the places the car reveals during runout where the body can borrow steadiness. Reader assigns roles, Maro peens. Bucking bar behind plate, watcher, that's your arm today. Rin feeds rivets, clean hands. Lael on strap and bell. Harka on floor. Children. She nods at the waiting semicircle of narrow knees and bright eyes. Count the rails so we strike on the longs. Not loud. Honest. You have held many small weights since boarding. The bucking bar is another, dense, not heavy by pride but by intention. It pulls your wrist toward the promise of bruise and you adjust, tucking elbow against ribs the way Harka shows, rolling the forearm so bone takes the argument, not tendon. Rin slides the panel free. The cavity's breath smells of dust, leather, and the ghost of red weather. The dog plate you and he set yesterday sits where you left it. Witness marks unbroken, chalk lines as thin and specific as a vow. On the long, Reader reminds without raising her voice, and the car gives you one, short, long. The first tap is Maro's, a kiss rather than a blow, centered, listening. The snap cups the rivet head. Your bar answers with a correspondence you can feel more than hear. I am here. I am behind you, strike. Pause. Strike. The dome begins almost at once, metal choosing roundness because Hand and Snap asked politely. The children keep time under their breath. Short, short, now. Short, short, now. Lael's fingers rest on the doubled strap, not strangling it, reminding it of the job. Harka's palm on the floor tells her what the car thinks of your work. Her eyes half close. Rin passes the next rivet, then the next, each one slid home with the surety of a bead finding its place on a string. The train remembers to be cruel precisely once. A long curve arrives early, wind-minded, laying a side thought into the wall. Your wrist says now, the bar says not now. Maro lifts the snap off the head with a mercy that looks like reflex. Everyone holds breath as if breath weighed enough to matter. The curve passes, embarrassed at its timing. Readers in other cars will later say the lamps lowered themselves of their own accord for 2 heartbeats. Here, the only light is the jar hooded to a patient ember and the little glimmer of the new metal eye. Again, says Rita softly, which also means thank you for waiting. Strike. Pause. Strike. The old rivet hole that had drifted becomes a throat that accepts persuasion. The new rivet mushrooms wider, then rounds. A circle takes the place of an ellipse. Your wrist stops asking, starts agreeing. Maro's arm, a metronome forged by years, does not hurry and refuses to be delayed. The snap speaks in a tone that puts a smile in his teeth. One more, he says. For our grandchildren. They finish with 3 domes in a neat row and 2 tiny witness lines that cross bar, head, and plate. Honesty you can check at a glance. Rin wipes the bright with oiled rag the way you wipe a child's brow after work. Lael gives the bell a hard look that is somehow a compliment. Iharka lifts her hand from the floor, turns her palm up and checks the constellation of grit there, as if the stars arranged themselves into satisfied. Reader does not clap. She draws a small square on the board under work done and fills it in. Port 4 R, cold set. Snap good. Buck good. Struck on longs. Under that she writes, in her tidy hand, heart thanked at third breath. It seems arrogant until, 3 minutes later, the heart eases once, twice, thrice in those loving exhale steps you have learned to hear as an engine's approval. No one bows. Jen does wink at the ceiling. Flattery accepted, she mutters to the flywheel she cannot see. Lunch is ceremonial only in the sense that the hands that made it were allowed to be proud. Stew leans into the spoon as if taught. Bread remembers the trick of being crisp where it was tired. Pickles bite without meanness. A tower apple reappears, halved and halved again until it is 6 generosity-sized smiles. A boy uses his washer coin to buy 1 story from Reader about the first rivet, which is either myth or manual depending on the teller. She makes it both so no one has to argue. In the afternoon, the train practices being a town again. The market unrolls its counters. A hinge finds a door. A jar of nails moves from the man with the hat to the woman with the lamp, which is how institutions are named here. The house of small repairs becomes briefly the house of small theaters. Lael cuts ladder glyphs out of brown paper and tapes them to a shadow puppet screen made of a bedsheet, and the children make hands duck on cue, and everyone laughs in the register that doesn't cost the rails anything. Rita adds a new practice to the school. Rail solfege, she calls it, and you realize someone needs to teach the next set of watches where the longs hide when panic wants to run. Listen, she says, tapping the chalk once, and find the safe seconds. She draws a bar of music that is also a diagram of sleepers, ties a string between strike and hold, and the room nods because this is not art here. It is endurance arranged to sound like a song. 8. Clouds low and courteous gather on both sides of the windows as if to give the day edges without bringing weather. The board's warning remains bare of ribbons. Under rumor, Harka writes, soft ground returns at 262, counterwalk starboard, practice once in the school, then in the aisle. Morrow passing adds in smaller script, request for bucking bar fulfilled, return favor at harvest with tools where tower hands don't have enough fingers. It's a nonsense debt, but he writes it anyway. The board tracks not only force but gratitude. Evening tries on its lamplight. The stovecar burns a color you would call right even if you hadn't learned the language. Anna counts drips with less urgency than yesterday and moves one jar back to its usual place because balance can be a gift as well as a job. The breakhouse men watch their gauges with the calm of people who carry bigger stories than needles can tell. One hums just enough to tune the couplers. Names happen again because work refines people into their truer nouns. Reader doesn't make a show of it. She hands a thin stamped tag to Harka, a tag that simply reads ear, and the room smiles because sometimes the obvious deserves ceremony. She looks at you as if considering and then decides against it, which feels like kindness rather than denial. You have not earned your capital letter yet. After dinner, a quiet comes that isn't still song but shares its DNA. It has to do with hands that have done enough for one day and tools that found their hooks without being told. Someone writes a poem on a scrap, 4 lines that rhyme bolt with fault without shame and make Jen laugh into her sleeve. Rin finds you and puts something small and rough in your palm. A rivet tail, mushroomed ugly from practice on a sandbag, the first tries from the morning. Pocket weight, he says. To remember the count? If you forget, your leg will tell you night does not bring a black mouth or a span or red weather. It brings a test so small you could miss it if you were the kind of person who prefers catastrophes to effort. A door decides to rattle in its track whenever the car learns a new thought. 3 times it offers its opinion and 3 times it is answered with a folded wedge of card and a string tied in a way the house of small repairs could do asleep. Reader writes on the list of squeaks, door chose not to be lonely, we kept it company with a wedge. Then, beneath, she writes what passes for philosophy here. Tools are how we talk back to noise. When the lamps lower, Lael makes one last round with her bell string and her small frown of attention. The viewport strap tells her it is becoming an old friend. She ties its end flatter so the knot won't remember pride in the night. Harka lays her hand on the floor and announces, as if to a child, "We are level." The heart, perhaps bored, eases once in a gesture so slight only the people who sleep near pipes will notice. Imaro says to nobody, "You're welcome," which in his mouth is the same as good night. You lie down with the bucking bar's memory in your bones, the way it wanted to fall and learned not to when you told it who you were with your elbow. The rivet tail in your pocket says hello to your thigh. The board in the near dark shows its geometry, names under shift, rumors corralled, warnings idle, work done filled with patient squares. Before your eyes close, reader returns the folded note from the tower to the tin and tucks the tin behind the board, the way a librarian shelves a book that wants to be loaned again. She catches your look. "We will send them something when the line allows," she says. Grease in glass. A song, a hinge that doesn't lie. She nods at the viewport. And a story of a rivet set on the longs. Here is the seventh truth in a place that won't stop. Plot is not made by distance but by repair. The day's story was a circle that refused to skew, a dome coaxed into being, a breath eased at the right moment because hands and rails agreed on a syllable. You would not last here for lack of spectacular courage. No one needs that. You would fail, if you failed, at the quieter bravery, at counting correctly when it's dull, at striking only on the longs, at holding a bar steady while someone else does the glorious part. The train hums its opinion of your progress in a note you can finally sleep inside. By morning, the train's note has the bright edge it wears after a night that did not argue. Lamps rise clean without negotiation. The dogplate over the viewport rivet shows its chalk witnesses in the same neat cross you drew yesterday. Honest metal telling you it stayed where you asked. On the board, under rumor, a new line appears in field hand you've learned to recognize as Tower script, pinned with a green thread. Crossing at midday. Parallel line active 5 minutes. No nets. Lights only. Reader adds 3 small boxes beside it and writes in her precise teacher's hand, blink, mirror, pipe. Harka draws 2 dots under the word pipe, and you understand that messages will run today not just through air and glass, but along the bones of the train itself. Preparation spreads with the quiet excitement usually reserved for harvest. No one runs. No one spends voice. But tools find hands without being looked for. In the workshop, Maro lifts a crate from a high shelf that carries the word signal in letters that have been painted over, then kept fresh 100 times. Inside, shutter plates cut from tin, polished until they could shame the lamps, a set of mirrors wrapped in cloth, a pair of lantern hoods with slats that can pinch light into code, and a folded flag whose blue has been mended in 3 shades but still insists on being a single color. Reader posts the day's duty map with fewer words than usual. Mirror hood 2. Pipe tap, Harka. Blink code, reader. Carry light, watcher, Rin. Strap, bell, Lael. Under gifts, she writes a list that sounds like a story stripped of adjectives. Jar of good grease, hinge that doesn't lie, 2 coils copper, a page of rail solfege, rivet tail, salt. Anna arrives at that moment with a small jar of still salt white as honesty, adds it to the basket of gifts, and tucks a sprig of thyme on top like a thought. Smell is a message too, she claims, and no one argues because her jars have kept mouths civil. In the school, children practice blink code with Reader. Long, short, short means we are listening. Short, long becomes span ahead. 3 longs, together, slowly. Hold what can be held. She choreographs hands and lids, teaching them to talk in light without wasting it. She pins the zinc strip with its triple ladders just below the code chart as if the two were cousins in the same grammar. Harka strings the line that will carry taps between cars, twine to pipe, pipe to floor, floor to palm. She sits on the mat by the break house with her hand on a copper riser and looks like a person tuned to a frequency you can't hear until she decides you can. "Oh, we'll pass the crossings by bone," she explains. "Blink is for them. Pipe is for us. The gifts for the towers are packed in a net bag that will not fly today. They will go on the next run with sacks of buckwheat and brake shoes, as thanks follows labor where it can." Reader slips the rivet tail you carry into the bag with a look that says, "We keep our errors and our learning together." She adds a scrap of paper on which she's written a clear sentence. "Rivet set on the longs. Thank you for the bar." She dots the I in rivet with a tiny ladder because jokes are a kind of oil. Before the hour, the coaches acquire a particular hush that isn't fear. It is expectation taught good behavior. Spoons stop being bells. Socks are looped, not draped. Lael runs a palm along the viewport strap and lays the bell string across her wrist the way one might leash a proud dog. The house of small repairs pins a wedge beneath a rattle-prone step just to keep it from volunteering its opinion. Marrow tests a lantern hood with 2 fingers, light slotted into a disciplined tongue, and nods. The second bell brings the west light with it, the hour the towers keep for coordination. The rumor line on the board flutters under someone's breath, then lies still. Harka taps twice, a cue that runs into the floor and up through your bones. Ready. The mirrors take their post at side panes, one held by Jen with her stove-burnished hands, one by the scar-armed runner whose grin has become an emblem of work well-chanced. Reader stands by the forward window with her hooded lamp and her spare palm half raised, as if she means to conduct a choir that knows the piece by heart and only needs the opening note. The other train announces itself the way water announces depth, a change in the undertone, a shadow not cast by weather, a hum that rhymes with your own, but is not it. At first it is a dark, low line in the far pane. Then it resolves into ribs and windows and a moving city like yours, running the opposite direction, holding its people upright with the same stubborn grace. In its side glass, shapes of faces appear and vanish, all of them too quick to be known and as familiar as mirrors. Reader gives the first phrase, 2 slow blinks, 1 quick. "We see you." Across the space, the other train's hood answers with the same, then adds 2 shorts. "We see you too." Children in your school car whisper the code into shoulders because words refuse to sit still. The scarman flips his mirror a fraction. A flare of signal light from the other side catches it and ricochets down your row into Jen's plate and out again, a bright braid thrown confidently between worlds. Harka's tap runs the length of 4 cars, short, long, short, long. The other train answers in light with a ladder shape blinked over and over, unmistakable. 2 rungs, then a long dark, a 3rd rung, then 3 longs, well spaced. 2 low, 1 later, hold what can be held. Reader lifts her lamp and sends back the triple long you've been practicing. Your whole carriage seems to inhale together on the 2nd long and exhale on the 3rd. Kindness has a tempo. Details rush at you like rain seen from a dry porch. A coat mended with a color fashionable in a century you didn't live through. A boy on the other side holding a jar of light like the one you carried last night. A tin inked with block letters reading, bread, not. A woman tapping code with a spoon on the metal below her window, brow furrowed in a way that makes you want to trust her recipes. A small, ridiculous kite tied to a pole through the opposite train's roof hatch, shaped like a fish that has learned to fly. The parallel stretch is longer than rumor promised. Enough to say more. Reader asks, with light and a brief flare of the mirror, a phrase that is equal parts courtesy and need. Soft ground at 262. The other train's hood answers with a slow, careful blink that fills your ribs. Yes, starboard walk. Harker's taps confirm, counterwalk starboard. The brakehouse men receive it as if they were already halfway up from their bench. The board gets a new chalk line without anyone needing to say, write that down. Children press faces to glass, then pull back because Lael's hand ghosts up, reminding them about straps and bells and the difference between urge and permission. One of them holds up a paper ladder cut this morning. A child on the other train does the same. Both laugh, bright, involuntary, and the trains carry the sound away from the space between them so it doesn't collide and make an echo they can't afford. Rin slips his cap lower because caps are the kind of thing a day like this remembers. He does not wink. He is busy counting rails by the feel in his knees. On the longs, he murmurs automatically to nobody, and Maro, not looking up from his post near the lamp hood, says, always. Reader sends one more sentence, light guarded but legible. Rivet holds. The answer comes back with an extravagance that feels like a holiday. 3 long blinks and then a short, which is not in your codebook but carries its own obviousness. Good. You do not know why your throat tightens. You are not embarrassed when it does. The crossing ends not with a wave but with a tapering. The other train's note curls away into a side path of sound. Your mirrors give back only sky. The lantern hoods darken with the restraint of closed books. Harka's taps spell simply done. The car releases an inch of height you didn't realize it had been holding. Reader lowers the hood, palms the lamp as if cooling a child from a fever, and looks at every face in the room once, taking attendance for a moment that will need to be recalled accurately later. On the board, she writes 3 short lines under work done. Crossing answered, code carried, ground warning received. Under rumor, she adds a thread. Counterwalk 262, starboard. Harker draws a neat dot under that, which means grain of truth, upon which to build bread. Jen wipes the mirror plates with a cloth wrung damp, so future light won't be asked to work harder than it needs to. The flag is folded into the tuck that has been teaching fingers the same dance for generations. After the crossing, the train behaves like a town shaking rain off its shoulders. The market opens for 7 minutes, enough to let a hinge become a promise on somebody's door, and a washer coin become a favor for tomorrow's hands. In the house of small repairs, Leia lays the paper ladders in a row and glues them to the school map, not where the tunnels live, but along a blank strip of canvas with one label: Friends. The children argue about whether the ladder should have 3 rungs or 2, and then realize the argument is its own kind of Thanksgiving and stop. Anna brings out a kettle and a pinch of something that smells like green. Tea appears with the dignity of a practiced magic trick. The cups are thin metal that sing if you're careless. No one is careless. The first sip is a vote for ordinary. It passes unanimously. Rita finds you where you are still holding the coil jar by habit long after the light is hung. She carries a small strip of tin between 2 fingers the way one carries a match in wind. You have seen these strips handed out in unceremonious ceremonies. Names, they call them, not awards. She does not make a speech. She makes a sentence that fits into the space the train allows for speeches. You see, then you say, then you help, she says. She fastens the strip to the strap of your belt with a copper tack from the House of Necessary Cloth. The tin reads simply, Witness. It is absurd how light it is and how heavy. Grin, who has been pretending not to hover, grins a new grin that has less bravado and more brother in it. Washer for a witness, he says, palming you his old joke like a coin and making it worth more. Work does not take a holiday for your name. Harka has already tapped the counterwalk into people's bones. At mile 262, the aisle turns into a moving ribbon of deliberate feet, starboard only. 2 steps, pause, breathe. The soft ground whispers under the car like a crowd that can be convinced. The train remembers how to hold itself upright. A jar shifts a thumb width and is scolded back into line by Anna's hip. Leia's bell stays the most obedient bell anyone ever taught how not to ring. Between the rail solfege and the slow feet, the soft ground decides to be a problem some other day. The board gets 3 new filled squares under work done and exactly 0 under warning. Harka writes on the list of squeaks a line with no music to it. Nothing volunteered a noise. She underlines it twice because absence also deserves to be recorded. Afternoon settles with the authority of a blanket. The coil stills exhale a little faster. The red weather has moved on. Salt grains mound in Anna's dish like a merit you can spend later. In the stove car, Jen teaches a child how to hold a pan without telling it a story first. In the break house, one of the men laces his boots tighter, not because they are loose, but because he promised himself after a crossing long ago that he would never coast through an easy hour in an untidy way. At the net wagon, the basket of gifts waits by the hatch, ready for the next tower they owe. The hinge does not creak because Rita tested it herself 6 times, and because the hinge knows it is being sent to be exemplary. The coil of copper sits as if thinking. The page of rail solfege is weighed at one corner with a washer coin, so wind will not misread it. The rivet tail is tied to a string so it can be hung in a school like a question that has learned a better shape. Dinner happens in the soft register the train uses when it has had enough conversation with fate for one day. Stew tastes of being left alone at the right heat. Bread decides it will pretend to be new. Someone finds a jar of beans in a crate marked with a city no one has seen, and the beans bloom into a flavor that makes 3 elders close their eyes because memory was a taste before it was a picture. A child leans his head on Lael's shoulder and Lael adjusts her strap so the tin doesn't press his ear. They do not throw a festival for the crossing. They do not name the hour. Yet the lamps wear the glow the car wears after a wedding in a story. No confetti, no noise, the quiet rearranged into something wider. Reader picks up the pencil and, in the small bottom margin of the board, where philosophy is allowed if it's brief, writes, "We are not alone on the rails." Harka adds below it, "And that is not a reason to be lazy." Before the last lamp bows its head, Maro goes to the heart and stands close enough to feel the governor's dance in his teeth. He inclines his head not like a prayer and not like an apology. "Tell yours we said hello," he says, "whether to the engine or to the other train's engine or to both, the sentence doesn't care." As if amused, the heart eases once, an exhale placed precisely where you will remember it later. You sleep with your new tin pressing an honest circle against your hip, and the rivet tail await the size of your thumb in your pocket. The train holds its long vowel of competence and carries you through the kind of night that keeps the next day possible. If you listen at the edge of sleep, there is a faint echo of the other train's hum braided under your own, the way a good harmony follows you out of a room. Reader would tell you not to make a religion of it. Harka would tell you to learn where to put your hand when you need to hear it again. Here is how the 8th truth writes itself in a place that does not stop. Distance is a rumor, repair is plot, company is fortune. You would not last a day here without learning to send your courage ahead of you in small, practical messages. Light closes, mirrors nodding, taps that travel through bone, a strap check twice, a bell that does not sing. And just as your eyes are closing, a child somewhere in the school taps out 3 longs with a spoon, practicing, and every hand that needs to hear it already knows what to do.